Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Ireland once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. Now we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. The last review I did from these guys was about 2 years ago, and the two beers that we had a look at were very nice actually, quite unusual styles, but they were very well done. The one that we're going to have a look at today is a slightly more conventional style. It's one that I do enjoy though, so I have to say I'm very curious to see how this one turns out, and definitely nice to have some Irish beer for you here on Rampant Lion Reviews again. So for this one, we are going to head to Letterkenny in County Donegal in the very northwest of Ireland, and we're having a look at another beer from Kinnegar Brewing. So this particular beer is called the Big Bunny. It comes in at 6% ABV, and this one is a New England IPA, hazy IPA, or as they're calling it on the can, an East Coast style IPA. So yeah, this I think should be quite interesting. Now the last beers that we had from this brewery were the Black IPA, which was a Black Rye IPA if I remember correctly, and the Rye IPA, but I forget the exact names of those beers I have to say, but we do have another 3 beyond this one to have a look at, so I'm curious to see what they're going to have in store for us. But all of these ones are from the kind of lighter end of the spectrum, I guess we could say. The other 2 were quite dark beers in fact. But yeah, this should make for an interesting one. A couple of shout outs in this video as well actually. So the first one is to Paul Rogers of Dalriada Imports. It's thanks to him that you guys are getting to enjoy this kind of mini series of Irish beers that we're doing on the channel over the next little while. He supplies me with pretty much all of the Irish beers that I review for you here. His company, Dalriada Imports, they bring the beers from Ireland over into Scotland, and pretty much any Irish beer, any Irish craft beer, outside, I think it's outside of Whiplash actually, he is the one that's getting these beers over into Scotland and distributing them around, which is great. And he's starting to expand down into England as well, which is very exciting. So big shout out to him, and thank you to him for making these Irish reviews possible, and I hope that you guys enjoy them. There's also 2 Irish beer tubers these days. So the first one is Thomas McCarthy of Window Beer, and there's also Brendan Sewell of Views on Brews. Both very nice guys. You might have seen them on my hangouts that I've done, so do make sure you check out their channels. I'll put the links to them in the video description for you below. So if you want to see Irish craft beer reviewed a bit more regularly than I do, make sure you go and give them a subscribe. But yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. We'll get cracking with the review. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Kinnegar Brewing, and we will add more to that in the near future as I've said. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Irish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to very regularly at the moment, and I will continue to add to that in the future. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then. So Kinnegar Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Letterkenny in Donegal, and the company was founded back in 2011 and then opened its doors in July of 2013 under the guidance of Rick Levert and Libby Carton. So Rick comes from a background in design and marketing, and he dabbled in home brewing from around 2011 before he decided later on that he wanted to do some brewing courses, and he did this at the University of California, Davis over in America, and also at the VLB Institute in Berlin in Germany. So the original brewery that they started was in Rathmullen, and it had a capacity of 10,000 hectolitres at maximum. But from the beginning they were actually bottling all of their beers, but in more recent years of course they've been canning a large chunk of them. But they grew very quickly, and this was to the point where their brewing schedule soon became unsustainable. Apparently they were running from 4 AM until midnight just to meet the demand that they had, and so they decided that they had to expand their brewing facility in this case, and so they moved to a new brewery in Letterkenny which is called K2 in March of 2017, and it has about a 35,000 hectolitre output, which has allowed them to produce more special and one-off brews as well. But they say that their beers are farmhouse, beers. So they're unfiltered, unpasteurized, and carbonated naturally in the primary fermentation. And these guys have been developing a lot of new recipes over the last few years and just kind of building up, if you like, to capacity in this new facility. But as of October 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 65 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. And like I said, there are many different styles. They do lagers, they do different IPAs, there's a few porters and stouts and things like that as well. And I think beyond these ones that we're doing from Kinnegar, I think I will need to have a little look at some of the porters and stouts, because that's something we haven't touched on from them yet. So yeah, I look forward to that when the time comes. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Kinnegar Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's it for your history section. So let's have a little look at the artwork on this one then before we open it up. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is quite nice. If I bring this into the camera, you can see the Kinnegar farmhouse beers, and this is their symbol there as well. It also says a little bit on the back there, farmhouse beers from Donegal, which is nice. This is a 440ml can, and unfortunately I don't have any idea what this beer would actually cost because Paul just gave them to me, so unfortunately I can't fill you in on a price for this one. I might need to ask him about that actually to add that into the reviews. But it says on the back here, it tells you a little bit about the brewery. Apparently County Donegal is on Ireland's Wild Atlantic Way. I didn't know it was called that, but it tells you here about Big Bunny. So Big Bunny is a bigger, juicier sister to our White Rabbit and blends a punchy hop wallop with a creamy wheat mouthfeel. So yeah, this should be quite nice. And does it contain oats as well? Yes, it does. So yeah, it contains oats and wheat. It doesn't tell you anything about the hops in it, of course, or the specific malt base, the barley malt base. But yeah, very nicely presented beer, this one. The Big Bunny New England Hazy IPA, or an East Coast style IPA as they're calling it, from Kinnegar Brewing in Donegal, Ireland. Plain silver top on the can here. Let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. And as I say, very nice. Oh, just didn't want to open. Very nice to have some Irish beers for you once again on the channel. I honestly couldn't tell you what the last one I reviewed was, come to think of it, so that's something I will need to try and figure out. Let me see. Maybe the sediment is at the bottom. There you go. I think there's a bit more sediment coming out of this one now. Sugar up again, just see. So there we are. Let me just plonk that back so it looks nice for the video. But yeah, looks pretty good. So before the head disappears on this one, you can see that it's poured with a solid finger of a frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head, actually, sort of creamy white colour. But yeah, it looks pretty solid, this one, I have to say. That head, as you can see, is very frothy. It's not kind of bumpy or anything like that, but it looks absolutely awesome, I have to say. Still love this camera. Ridiculously good. But yeah, as you can see, if we shine the light through this beer, it's actually a very kind of bright, you can see it's actually a very kind of rich yellow, I guess we could say. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But overall, it looks very nice. And remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This determines the magnitude of the colour. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. And a wort boil for this one, for a New England IPA like this, is going to be about 90 minutes, I would say. It can vary a little bit, of course, though. But any adjuncts that you put in and any barrel aging that you do will also affect that. Will also affect the colour of the beer as well. But you don't really have to care about that when it comes to hazy New England IPAs or East Coast style IPAs, as these guys are calling it. But yeah, certainly looks the part, this one, but certainly not quite as hazy as we're used to from an East Coast or a New England IPA, this one. I do wonder if this will be more along the lines of like something from Lawson's Finest Liquids. Remember, they're obviously a very well-known New England brewery, but theirs were kind of like this. They weren't the haziest of IPAs, come to think of it. So I do wonder if this is maybe a little bit more in that kind of style. But yeah, this looks pretty nice. It looks pretty solid. It does, to me, it does look a little bit more like a West Coast. I'm going to say that. It does look a little bit more like what we'd expect from a West Coast IPA. A bit of a natural haze to it rather than that, big soupy gloopy sort of thing that we've become accustomed to with New England IPAs. But yeah, I don't think there's anything more we need to say about the appearance of this one. Let's take a look at the aroma and see how we go. So yeah, first impression of the aroma of this one then, it does smell, pretty farmhousey actually. It reminds me to a degree of some of the beers that I've had from Stockholm Brewing Company actually, and their ones always had this kind of similar crackery, farmhousey sort of thing. So that's what you get right out of the base of this. It's got a nice bit of juicy fruitiness to it and quite a nice bright green component. So that's my first impression of this beer. Farmhousey, quite bright green, and then a nice little bit of a fruity character to it. So let's look at that aroma a little bit more kind of in depth then and see how we go. Yeah. So for me, backbone of this beer is quite interesting. So you get a little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker, sort of almost slightly woody note there. So definitely some brown bread, some nice kind of brown bready characters in there for sure. A little bit of bread crust, and yeah. So a little bit of brown bread, kind of bread crusty sort of thing. I do like how that kind of comes out of it. You do get a wee bit, you can smell the sort of wheatiness and the oatiness in this as well actually. So you can smell a bit of white bread and a little bit of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose. And you also, as I say, you can smell a little bit of oatiness in there. There is a wee bit of an almost kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing too, but this is quite an interesting beer in that sense because you do get the kind of smoothness of the oats and the wheaty character out of it, but you also get a little bit of a more kind of farmhousey, like it reminds me of the Stockholm Brewing beers. I'm just going to put the rest of this in the glass actually and just see, because as I say, this is one of the least hazy New England sort of East Coast IPAs that I've come across. But that said, there's no sediment in the bottom of the can there. So this is how it is meant to be. Sometimes if you leave them in the fridge too long, you can get things like that. But no, this is how this beer is supposed to be. But other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the malt base on this one. On the hoppy side of things though, you do get maybe you get one or two little woody elements out of this, but no, crackers, bit Jacob's cream cracker, a little bit of woody character in there, bread crust, brown bread, white bread, bit of wheaty bitiness, bit of oatiness, and maybe a teeny little bit of biscuit. I think that's the malty side of the beer summed up. Now, on the hoppy side of things, the green component. So for me, I'm curious to know what hop this is. There's something familiar about this. I do wonder, could it be a little bit of like Mosaic or Azaka or something like that? But anyway, you can't. There's too many hops these days really to play guess the hops as I always used to. I used to be pretty good at it as well, but now there's just too many of them. But yeah, on the green component, there's certainly a wee little bit of earthiness out of this one. I think there's a wee touch of herbal character as well. And it was the earthiness and the kind of and something else that was making me think that maybe this was a bit of Mosaic in here. But yeah, certainly a nice wee bit of wee touch of earthiness, wee bit of herbal quality. It's got a lovely kind of bright floral aromaticity to it, which I like as well. And then you get a nice bit of a kind of wet, freshly cut grass. It's got a little bit of that fresh, wetly cut, zesty, grassy sort of thing to it. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this one. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. The green component, I think, adds another dimension to the beer, so you've got a good contrast between the malt base and the green component here. But let's look at the fruity side just to round off the aroma. So for me, I think there's a wee bit of tropical fruit in this as well. Like there's a wee bit of a kind of smooth mango. I think this is something simple in this. I think this might be like a Citra Mosaic base in here, because it smells familiar. It does actually smell quite familiar, but it could be like, something like Simcoe and Mosaic. But I'm tempted to say Citra, because I do get a bit of mango out of it. I get some of those softer kind of apricot-y notes as well, but I also get quite a bit of zestiness. There's quite a kind of zesty, lemon-limey sort of thing. I say more lemony. There's a bit of zesty, a little bit of a zesty lemon in there, but I also get a wee bit of a kind of tangerine-y, orange character to this one as well, which I think is pretty good. So yeah, some interesting stuff going on in this beer. I have to say, I do like how it goes about its business for sure. Yeah, so nice fruity component there, mix of tropical and citrusy fruit, and then you've got a nice bright floral aromatic green component there, and an interesting malt base. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to take a little bit of time to enjoy that aroma before you get stuck into the beer. But I think it's about time that we try this one then. So not the most conventional of East Coast or New England IPAs, however you want to describe them. But yeah, this is the Big Bunny 6%er from Kinnegar Brewing in Letterkenny in Donegal over in the northwest of Ireland. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and thank you to Paul once again. Let's go for it. Yeah, that's a pretty solid sessioner, that. It's pretty solid beer, I have to say, so well done to Kinnegar. You know, that's it's one of these ones where if I was tasting this blind, I would say it's a little bit more like a hybrid, but it does in a sense remind me of the type of IPAs that I had from Lawson's Finest Liquids, because their ones were definitely a little bit more, they have that kind of West Coasty element to them. They still had the New England sort of smoothness, if you like, but they still had a little bit of the kind of West Coasty note. So it's almost like you've got a New England, it's almost like, for me, this beer is like you combine like a West Coast Pale Ale and a New England Pale Ale, and you take the alcohol up a little bit to regular IPA strength, if you like. So that's what it's like with this one. It's kind of like you've got a New England breadiness to the beer, but you've got a bit of the West Coasty sort of biscuity, caramelly sort of thing. So this is interesting. This really is interesting for me. Now, when it comes to West Coast IPAs, there's two directions you can go. You can be a bit more kind of bready and biscuity, or you can be a bit more oily and caramelly, I think. So this one leans a bit more towards that bready biscuity thing from the West Coast side of things. On the New England side, I think there's 6 directions you can take. You can be more kind of yeasty and farmhousey. You can be more sort of rye leaning and grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or you can be a little bit more kind of brown sugary leaning, a bit sweeter. So it kind of takes the approach of having a bit of wheat and being a bit more, it's got a mix of the wheat, the barley malt, and the kind of farmhousey side of things from the New England perspective. So this is a really interesting beer, but the closest thing that I can think of that I've had to this would be the Lawson's Finest Liquids ones. When I was mentioning Stockholm Brewing earlier, it's quite a bit sweeter than it is quite a little bit sweeter than the other ones, and I think the bitterness is about the same. I remember this beer is a little bit more bitter, and I remember the Lawson's ones just still having a bit of that West Coast bitterness in them. But the other brewery, of course, that would come to mind would be, would be Alchemist, and the Focal Banger and Heady Topper. So it's not a million miles away from those either, but I think those are both double IPAs if I remember rightly. Those are quite heavy ones. But yeah, this gets a thumbs up for me. It's something different. It is something a little bit different. But I can appreciate what they're doing here. I wonder if this is one of their more popular beers actually. But yeah, it's good. Let's break it down for you then and describe the flavour a wee bit more kind of in depth. So straight away across the middle of your palate then, you can feel that sort of bread crusty backbone there. You got a bit of Jacob's cream cracker, you get a little bit of kind of bread crust, and towards the front of that middle third of your palate, you certainly get a little bit more of a kind of woody character coming out of the beer. So yeah. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I mean, it does, the further you go into the aftertaste, this beer does develop a wee bit of dryness and a wee bit of graininess, which I think works for it. But on top of those layers, so we'll focus on the middle third of your palate for just now. You've got that Jacob's cream crackery backbone, bread crust, brown bread, smooth white bread in there, and then towards the front half of that middle third of your tongue, there is a little bit of woodiness for sure. You can feel on top of the brown bready layer, there's a little bit of a white bready character. You can feel the wheat sort of thickening the middle third of your palate out actually. And this beer is actually, it has quite a tall flavour in that middle third of your palate, but it's got an even taller flavour on the back third of your tongue, which we'll come to in a minute. But you can feel in the middle of your palate, you can feel there's a little circle there, and you get a smooth kind of oatiness coming out of it as well. So I do like a little bit of that, and there's also some nice kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit elements to the beer as well. So this one goes together really quite nicely in a sense. It's pretty solid from that perspective. Actually, the more that you drink of it as well, it does get slightly sweeter, and that's quite interesting for sure. And I think the most complex part of this beer is that middle third of the palate. There's quite a few layers to it, and as I say, it's quite a tall flavour. So that's really interesting with this one. But I like this. You know, a lot of people speak quite highly of Kinnegar Brewery, and having, you know, coming back to them after about 2 years, you can see why on the basis of this beer. So it's a thumbs up from me. But I think that's everything we really need to say about the middle third of the palate. Let's look at the back third of the palate then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a bit of a bready build up, nice kind of bread crusty note there. Then the base of that back third of your palate, you've got a nice wee bit of a kind of bread crusty. You've got a little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing, bread crust, and I would say the bread crust and the brown bready notes are significantly more kind of grainy and things like that in the back third of your palate, and then you get that wheaty bite there as well. The beer has got a little bit of a bite and a little bit of a zip to it in the back third of your palate, but on top of all of that, you've got a nice kind of yeasty note to it, and the yeasty character has that sort of, you know, like crusty bread, farmhousey, crackery, woody sort of thing. You've got all of that going on there, and that sits on top of everything else on that back third of your palate. So when you sit on top of the back third of your palate, you have that nice you've got the back, you can feel that it's a slightly taller flavour there, and as you come further forward, it just condenses down a little bit. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, it just squashes together a wee bit more. So I really like how that goes together in this beer. I think it works very, very well. So yeah, I think it's the malty and yeasty side of this beer is solidly done. So yeah, it reminds me of the Lawson's Finest liquid stuff that I've had from the States actually, which is a good thing. So on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate, definitely a wee bit of earthiness there. I do think this is like Citron Mosaic or Simcoe Mosaic, something like that. One of the, you know, it could be like Victoria's Secret or, you know, one of these more tropical leaning hops, but I think this is something that I have had before, and if this is a regular beer, they will choose hops that they can get all year round. So on the hoppy side of things, a little bit of earthiness there on the back corners of the palate. As you move further forward, it does have a wee bit of a herbal character to it. It does have a fair bit of earthiness, come to think of it. So I think the yeast is maybe pushing that side of the beer a little bit. But on the, as you say, as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, it's definitely more sort of floral and aromatic, and there is a little bit of a floral aromatic spice in this one. But then round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So you do get a little bit of a kind of grassiness out of it, and it's quite a wet, freshly cut grass, this one, and it's also got a wee bit of a kind of zesty thing to it as well. But yeah, that goes together quite nicely in this one as well, in this one too. And this is fairly fresh, this beer. You can kind of tell with how it is. It is a fairly fresh one, this, which is nice. But yeah, I think the green component works for it as well. It gives you a bit of kind of nice just freshness and zip to it, and it works well with the sort of grainier and bitier side of the malt and the yeast too. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of the beer then. So the front third of your palate, border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of bready build up in there again, wee bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing. The base of that front third of your palate is a mix of kind of bread crust and white bread. You do get a little bit of that. Then the nice fruity esters come out in that oily bubble that sits on top. So let's look at those. So on top of that, on the fruity side of things, it just makes me think again, this has to be like Simcoe and Mosaic or Citra and Mosaic or something like that. I'm pretty settled on that it could be Mosaic, but I'm thinking what it might be paired with. But regardless, towards the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of a slightly stronger passion fruit, but as you come further forward, it feels a little bit more like a slightly oily mango, and you can feel one or two little, apricot-y notes and things like that underneath it. But yeah, I do like how that goes together too. But as you move into the kind of front half of that, front third of your palate, you've got a wee bit of, you've got a little bit of a more kind of orangey, tangerine sort of thing. And again, that makes me think the earthiness and the sort of tangerine note that this beer has makes me think Mosaic. But as you reach the very kind of front tip of the tongue, there's a bit of a kind of lemony, limey, zesty sort of thing, and that's something that you can get from Citra. And I don't think it's kind of Equinaut or Centennial or something like that. I think this is quite a simple hop bill. I think this is maybe just 2 hops that are in this one, or it could be 3. It could be a little bit like Equinaut, Simcoe, and Mosaic, or it could just be Citra and Mosaic. I think that, to me, those seem the most likely kind of combinations. But yeah, whatever it is they've done with this, I think it works quite well. It's quite the fruity combination, the more tropical side of things, the passion fruit, the mango, the kind of undertones, and then the slightly more orangey side of the beer, I think work very well together. And it's one of these ones where it's not kind of so in your face, but it's one of these beers it's a nice drinking beer, this one. It's an IPA that has the vibe of, it's a bit more like, it's got the kind of paleo drinkability in a sense. So this beer is really solid, actually, and this is my first impression of one of their lighter things, I guess we could say, because for me, like the Rye Ipa and the Black Rye Ipa that we had before, those aren't beers that you're going to session. Those are the ones that you try because there's something a bit different, So yeah, I think that kind of sums up my thoughts on the flavour of this beer quite well, actually. So let's just round off the review with the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise, I'd say it's pretty much in the middle of the spectrum. It's a mid-bodied beer, no doubt in my mind about that. The carbonation is pretty smooth, although there is a degree of crispness to it as well, which I do like. But yeah, it's got a nice kind of wet, it does have a nice kind of wet mouthfeel to it, which I really enjoy. So yeah, that works out quite well. On the hoppy side of things, it's got, I would say we're talking maybe, I think this has got maybe about 50 IBUs to it. I think it's somewhere in that region. I think it has got a little bit of bitterness to it. And again, this is something else that reminded me of the Lawson's Finest Liquid stuff. It really is. If we're talking New England IPAs, that is what this one is most akin to from memory. So yeah, malty side of things and yeasty side of things, it's got graininess, it's got smoothness and a little touch of sweetness. Then you've also got a little bit of a kind of more oily fruitiness as well. So yeah, a good blend of tropical and more citrusy, zesty fruits, but I think this works. So yeah, this one gets a thumbs up from me. I've got 2 other IPAs and a paleo to look at from this brewery as well, and on the back of this one, I'm quite curious to see what those have in store for us. But yeah, this was the Big Bunny East Coast IPA, as Kinnegar are putting it. But yeah, this one comes to you from Letterkenny in County Donegal over in the northwest of Ireland. But again, thank you to Paul for making this review possible. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Kinnegar Brewing. And as I said, we will return to these guys very, very soon. Till the next time, check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys with another Irish review very soon. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.